Welcome to the Hire Truckers Podcast, where we interview experts in driver recruiting. We provide industry insights, marketing trends, and motivation to help you level up your recruiting game. Welcome to the Hire Truckers Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Craddock, and today we have Terry Tesch with Stewart Petroleum Products. We're super excited to have him on the show today. And we've been talking about getting him on for, I think, a couple months now. Is that how long it's been, Terry?
It seems like that's about the right timing.
Yeah. And so some context, like after we released the first, I think 3 or 4 episodes, we had Terry reach out to me on LinkedIn and he's like, hey, like one thing that would really add value to the market is talking about driver retention, like not just the marketing side and recruiting side, but, you know, if you can't keep them in the company, then you're kind of wasting a lot of money on the recruiting side. And so I asked Terry, I'm like, well, who could I talk to about that? And he's like, well, I've got some experience in that. And then the more I dug in, he has a lot of experience with that. And so just for some context, Terry's been in wholesale fuel for 33 years, which is very similar to the transportation industry in that it's a tight-knit community. And then he's grown into the transportation side over the last 11 years, and then also still on the fuel side. And Terry was saying when he goes to industry events now, it feels like a family reunion, just where he's seeing all his old friends. And I really get that, just even, being in the transportation industry now for, I think 13, 14 years, I lose track. But yeah, when I go to these events, it's just so cool to see familiar faces. And yeah, it's just an industry that can be really good to you if you look out for other people.
Absolutely.
And bring others up alongside. So where I wanted to start today is I'll give a little backstory on my moving to Austin. And then I kind of want to hear of your story of moving back to Texas after getting laid off. So one thing that Terry and I have in common is we've been laid off in our careers. And, at the time when I got laid off almost 5 years ago, it was a really hard thing. But I knew, that God had a plan, and I started on this company the next day. And then kind of flash forward to a year and a half ago, my wife and I felt like we should make a move. Then we decided on Austin, and we were like, yeah, we'll move in like a year and or so after all these things fall into place. We have to sell our house. She has to have tenure. We thought it was going to be another year. And then find a daycare, find a house, list our house. Anyway, it was a list of kind of some big things. And, sometimes when God starts opening doors, they all open. So we found ourselves in Austin less than 2 months later after starting talking about it.
Wow.
And we had a new baby on the way. So now we have a 1-year-old. And in July, we will have been in Austin for 2 years, and absolutely love it. When I was getting back at the airport yesterday after visiting a couple fleets, I just took a picture of the cityscape, kind of like I have behind me here, of Austin. And it's just changed a lot in a very short period of time. And there's multiple taller buildings going up now, but it's just cool how it's become a home in such a short period of time. So Terry, if you want to walk us through just, the story of you moving back to Texas after getting laid off years ago.
Yeah. I had taken the gentleman that actually got me into the fuel industry, got hired by, of all people, the 4-letter sports network, ESPN, and asked me if I wanted to follow him into that industry. Obviously had no experience in it, but it was more of a marketing and sponsorship role, which is kind of right in my wheelhouse. Little did I know that after we moved to Orlando, one of his sponsors on that side of the business left the organization, and he became part of a pretty significant power struggle that ultimately he ended up losing. And the next morning they called me and said, hey, by the way, we don't want to split management team, and so we're going to ask for your keys. Now, at this point, this is in 2006. I haven't looked for a job since 1980. I had been transferred from role to role and followed this gentleman from one company to a second. And I remember driving home. I got terminated at the Hyatt Hotel at the Orlando airport. and they took my cell phone, my keys. They wouldn't even let me back in my office. And I remember driving home and thinking, I've got to walk in and tell my wife that I no longer am employed. We're 18 months removed from Texas, and which was really home for us. I'm blessed, as your 1-year-old is now, to be a native Texan. And it was a very scary moment, and was really wondering what I was going to do. Didn't have the network in Texas or in Florida that I had in Texas. And so I went home and told my wife what happened. And first thing she said is, well, I think we need a glass of wine. So we opened a bottle of wine. And I said to her, I said, Janet, I said, do you want to stay in Florida? Do you like it enough to stay here? And she said, Terry, she said, I'm going to tell you right now, I can't wait to go back to Texas. I just didn't know how to tell you. And so it was at that point that my mentality changed a little bit, that I thought, you know what? This isn't a setback. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to make my wife happier. This is an opportunity to go back to a place that I love, that I had contacts, that I had friends. And long story short, I reached out to 2 or 3 of the folks in my network, and within a week had a job offer. And within a month, Janet and I were moving back to Houston. And there is no other way for me to explain this other than the Lord took his hand and said, this is where you're supposed to be, young man. And this is where I'm at. And it led to a couple of interactions. A headhunter called me a couple of 3 years later, moved me to a better opportunity than what I came back to. And then the ownership of this company, who I had called on before I left Texas, reached out to me about, it'll be 12 years in September. They reached out and said, hey, would you like to come join us? And I had great respect for the organization. I said, absolutely. And I joke with the ownership. I came in vertically. They're going to have to take me out horizontally. So,
I love that.
It is truly, it was just another one of those just real world examples where if we will just trust in the plan that God has for us, it'll work out. It'll be just fine. And that's sometimes hard to remember in the midst of turbulation and troubles, but he's taken care of me and my family, and I'm thrilled to be here today and be able to share that story with you.
That's awesome, Terry. Yeah, I can really relate to that. Just changing perspective very quickly, of going from like the victim mentality to like, hey, this is God's plan. Like, I don't see all the pieces, but I could start to see them line up pretty quickly after getting laid off. And then just trusting. And I hope that kind of puts hope in some people that as they get laid off, lose a job, make a career change, make a move, with that goes contrary to their plan. And it seems like it's just chaos. And I just hope that it gives, just hearing Terry's story and then hearing my story just gives you hope, just when things are hard, just to lean in and trust. And so I appreciate you sharing that, Terry.
I saw believe it or not, this morning I saw a post on LinkedIn, and basically the essence of it was how you go through your struggles today will be somebody else's roadmap tomorrow. Yeah. And I thought that was pretty cool and pretty appropriate.
Yeah, that applies to today and when we release this episode. I love it. So the next thing I wanted to dive into is what we were talking about with retention. And so, you'd said, hey, I have some experience in this area. And so when we were talking on our pre-call, you said you became passionate about retention 5 or 6 years ago, and you thought you were rock stars at 55 to 60% turnover, which I would kind of say, for a lot of fleets with 100% turnover industry, that is a rock star. You're cutting it in half. So kind of walk me through that journey of how you've been able to even improve retention over that 55 to 60% turnover rate.
So 2 things have happened for us that kind of drove the decision-making process. And one was, it was just frustrating the amount of time, money, effort, and energy we were spending to bring in people to drive for us that really, in the long run, post-analysis, they just weren't the right fit from the beginning. And so we began to think a lot about how do we communicate better what a driver should expect when he comes to work for us, not just what we're going to expect of him. And then secondly, we were beginning to enter a period in our company where our parent was going to significantly ramp up their growth, and our fleet was going to have to expand significantly, and we were going to have to expand our geographic footprint. At this point, we were just in Texas. I had the ability to go see every one of my drivers literally on a day trip. So I thought to myself that, if we're going to manage a fleet that today we're in 9 states, back then we were probably something in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 trucks, and today we're 130 and 200 plus drivers. We weren't going to be able to afford nor have the manpower to replace 50 to 100 drivers a year. So got together with my team, and we began to talk, and the term that really came out was we had to become intentional about retention. And we had to become intentional about building a culture that drivers wanted to not only be a part of and were willing to take a risk on coming to work for us, but once we got them here, that we were the employer they thought they were getting into, and doing all of that while adhering to obviously safety standards, the litigious nature of the industry we work in. The billboard attorneys are everywhere. And if you're not doing the right thing, they'll find a way to tell you you're not doing the right thing. And so we just got really intentional about it and began to work to change our culture first inside of our office. There was no longer, was it going to be allowed to have an us versus them mentality with drivers. It was going to be, and I use the term in our organization, there are no just jobs. I'm not just a driver, or I'm not just a biller, or I'm not just a dispatcher. Every one of us is required to make this thing work. And for us to really make the drivers feel a part of that, we had to quit painting with the broad brush of, those drivers. So that was the first step. And then I really began to notice that communication was really what drivers wanted. A lot of times they don't necessarily like the decisions I make. We have we have literally a zero tolerance cell phone policy. And it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my career 9 years ago. But we took the time to explain to the drivers why. We took the time to really communicate it in advance of the decision and not just drop it on them like a 100-pound weight. And it resonated with me that communication with drivers was important. My wife and I are going to be married 37 years in September. We don't agree on everything, but we talk through everything, and we try to understand each other. And that's what I'm trying to do now with our driver community, is help them understand the why behind the what. And I think that's helped us. And then finally, I found myself very, very early on, as we stepped outside of the state of Texas, of saying, well, I'm just, I'm not going to be able to go to Alabama. But I made it a point to say, I'm going to go, the first few years, I'm going to go see every market at least once a year. And fortunately, now we're large enough. Now it's about once every 18 months, but I've got a lot of my senior leadership team that are following behind me and doing that. And I was sitting at a dinner, a holiday dinner with our group in Mobile, Alabama. They had been with us about 18 months at this point. And part of the problem we had in hiring was they said, well, you can't be as good as you say you are, when we were hiring them. And so I just point blank asked the question. I had 4 of the original 6 drivers that were still with us at that point. And I said, are we as good as we say we are? And they said, yes. And I said, what makes us good? And I had a driver look at me and he said, Mr. Terry, he said, I've driven truck for 40 years. He said, not only have I never known who the vice president of the company was, I sure as heck never had dinner with him. And it resonated with me on my drive back to my hotel that night that being present for our drivers is important. And that can be virtually, that can be via phone, that can be in person. But we have to be present for them and make them feel a part of the team, because that doesn't just happen by osmosis.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I loved your analogy on just the marriage relationship and communication. Because I think about my wife and I, we've been married, it'll be 14 years in June. Yeah, 2011. I'm like doing math in my head. 13 years. Anyway, 2011 be 13 years in June. And yeah, now we just, even in the first year of marriage, like we didn't, like we had a lot of conflict, and it was because we didn't address things head on and communicate. And that's kind of how things have changed now, is like if we're feeling something and start to get frustrated, like just communicate it head on and talk it out. And, I'm a lot earlier into the game, into the marriage game, but I can already see those steps kind of paying off. And then the other thing that I agree with you on is like getting in front of your drivers and in person. And I think in the age of like social media and like having, surface level connections with a lot of people, like actually getting face to face in person. Like I hope we can grab lunch, at some point.
Absolutely.
Face to face, this is good, like via video, but it's even better when you sit down. Like I had an opportunity earlier this week to sit down with two of our current clients, and we grabbed a meal with one of them and spent 2 hours, and then we went to swung by the terminal or main office of another fleet, and getting to just talk, and again, no business came up. Like it was just building that relationship, and just that was actually our final leg. And we're not a gigantic company right now. And so we were able, between me and a couple other people on our team, we've gotten face to face with everybody that we work with in Q1, which is kind of awesome. Crazy. Like we just wrapped it up. And you just get better feedback, and then people just want that authentic relationship. And so I think that's super important. So what did you see, like kind of as an impact? You were at 50 to 60% retention rate, 55 to 60% turnover. What's your turnover rate now?
So we are averaging over the last 3 years, 2023, 2022, and 21, about 14.5% turnover.
Wow.
Of that, we invite about 3/4 of those folks to leave for policy violation or whatever. And only about 1/4 of that number is choosing to leave us. And so, I'm pretty proud of the fact that our fleet has grown, our driver count has grown an average of 20% a year over the last 5 years. So we've done a lot of hiring just to fill new spots and satisfy growth. And to have a retention rate in the 96, 97, 98% range when you're doing that kind of hiring makes me feel very, very good about what we're doing. We think it starts in the recruiting process. We are very upfront in that we do things differently. That one of the things we do, first day that every employee in this company comes on board, they have a session with me and 2 other members of my senior leadership team. And I tell them it's literally just to let them see that I don't have horns growing out of my head or one eye on the side of my forehead or something like that. We're real people. Nobody likes to have business and laugh and giggle and then I have fun in this business or laugh and giggle more than I do. And so I want them to see the human side of me, not the title side of me. And I tell them that this is going to be the hardest, best job they've ever had because my expectations for them are greater. So what we try to do is before we get them into that onboarding, tell them what the expectations are. Ask the questions that say, there are drivers that today will tell you, I can't survive without my cell phone. You're not for us. We give a driver an opportunity to use his cell phone because we're a fuel hauler, so we're terminal to store, and then we've got time at the store to drop and all that. I get it. Work-life balance is important. If they want to make a phone call and check on how's the baby doing, what time is the PTA conference, what time soccer practice, hey, what time are our dinner reservations, make that phone call 5 or 10 minutes before you get back on the road. I don't mind. And in fact, we pay hourly. We don't even make them clock out to do that kind of stuff. So we set the expectation early. And then we try to communicate often. We try to tell them about the opportunities that exist within our business in terms of growth and, do they want to drive forever or not want to drive forever, that kind of thing. And then it just becomes the ongoing consistent effort around communication through the entire organization. I force our finance and accounting team to interact with drivers, and I force drivers at times to interact with dispatchers when they don't want to, or with HR when they don't want to, or with our general counsel. And by making it a whole of the enterprise effort, Now all of a sudden they don't feel like they're any different. They're just a part of the group.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that communication piece. Today's sponsor. Do you hire truck drivers in hard to fill areas, or do you need help creating efficiency in your recruiting department? You're not alone. With 50 plus years experience, Trucking Click specializes in data-driven strategies, industry-leading customer experience, and custom solutions that'll get you to your goal. Trucking Clicks is your go-to place for high-quality, direct leads at scale. Visit truckingclicks.com or call 512-982-0816 today. What's your view on promoting within versus like hiring from the outside? And how have you seen that kind of impact some of the stuff we're talking about on retention?
So we are huge believers in promoting from within. Every member of our dispatch team, every member of our operations team except one, and our safety director have all had their tails in our truck. And so what we do in those initial meetings, when I talk to drivers specifically, I tell them, I hope I've hired you to retire you, because we've got these opportunities that are going to present themselves in a fleet and a company that's growing, that's well capitalized, that has great ownership. We have the opportunity, and what I think, to promote from within. Now, we don't have a ban on outside hiring, because I think sometimes fresh perspective is really important to an organization. So we've done a couple of those kinds of hires as well. But by having a promote from within philosophy in the fuel hauling, I think the last number I saw, the average age of a fuel hauler is like 54 years old. And so what we're trying to do is attract a younger demographic to our fleet. And I think that the way to do that is to show them that there are opportunities beyond being behind the wheel. And we're starting to see some impact from that. We're starting to see a few more late 30s, early 40-year-olds come in and trust us to be their employer of choice. Because let's face it, when you're a driver and you're ready to change fleets, it's not a matter of are there any opportunities out there. It's which one am I going to take advantage of? And particularly as a hazmat hauler, our guys can drive dang near anything on the road. So we have to compete with everything from the Walmart OTI local regional distribution model all the way to, a hazmat hauler. And by having those opportunities promote from within and grow the company and give them an opportunity to enhance and further their careers, I think it's beginning to also be a point that people look at when they try to make their decision. Do they want to come to us? Is, hey, I may not have to be in the truck forever. Now, there's some guys, that's all they want to do. I had a truck driver tell me that, Terry, the reason people die of trucks is so they don't have to put up with people like you in an office every day. And I get that, right? It's a lifestyle and they like it. But we think that's hugely important. And we think it's going to continue to be important as the truck driver age and retirement begins to really take impact over the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be critical in helping us recruit the right talent to our organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you kind of foresee on that front? Because we have, a lot of different fleet executives listening in and directors are recruiting. Like, what do you think the impact on the driver population is going to be the next 5 to 10 years?
I will be honest with you. I'm more optimistic today than I was, say, 3 or 4 years ago, say pre-COVID. And part of that is because we have recognized that drivers are an essential piece of the economy in this country. And so we are now recognizing that you have to pay them well. You have to treat them well. You have to invest in them just like you do in whether it's your in-house general counsel or your fuel billers or your analyst. So I'm encouraged by that hopefully that will allow us to attract and retain more talent and younger talent. But I think there is going to be an impact. I mean, it is not a lifestyle that's for everybody. It's an incredibly challenging business. Again, the billboard attorneys, they scare a lot of folks, and particularly the guy that wants to, just before we got on here, Aaron, I got a notice from my director of ops. We have a driver in Florida that's going to leave us, not because he's unhappy, but he's decided he's going to take the jump, and he's bought 2 trucks, and he's going to go out and start his own fleet. I worry about that guy in the litigious environment that we operate in. But I'm encouraged. I think I think truck driving and the push in our country away from you have to have a 4-year degree to be successful. I'm living proof of that. I don't have a 4-year degree. I was not, at 18, I was more interested in girls and cars than I was education and books. So I had to, kind of knuckle down and work my way up the ladder. But, I'm encouraged that we're recognizing not just drivers, but skilled trades as a whole as a real viable career opportunity, and a real viable career opportunity that can provide a very comfortable living for you. My average driver last year made close to $100,000. And that's not working 65 or 70 hours a week. That's working 50 to 52 hours a week, because we think the 60 to 70 becomes a safety concern, and it becomes a work-life balance concern. It becomes a mental health concern. And those are the things that I want to try to do to make this industry more appealing to everything from young folks that say, college ain't for me, or the veteran transitioning out of his military commitment that has driven a truck in the military. Those kinds of things, if we'll continue to build this industry, will offset the losses from the baby boomer generation retiring, which is where a lot of the truck drivers have occupied the space.
Yeah. Yeah. I, when I was at the Mid-America Truck Show a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, I noticed it was kind of encouraging, like just more enthusiasm in the industry compared to last year, for instance. And yeah, it was just really encouraging and kind of unexpected, just because with spot rates still being low, I kind of expected it to be like last year, where people were just kind of down and out as a large, most people. But I just saw, more of an investment in marketing and booths and boots on the ground, and just, 60, 70,000 people showing up to Mid-America this year. And yeah, it just really encouraged me. And then there's a lot of, new players like startups, innovative businesses. There's all these initiatives to bring young drivers in and to get ahead of the diesel mechanic shortage.
Which is real.
Oh, it's real. That's, one of the hardest positions to do marketing on, to recruit for, because those guys just aren't actively looking like drivers sometimes are. And so, yeah, I think, there are some challenges with demographic shifts and people getting out of the market with an aging population. But yeah, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm towards, like, we can solve this as an industry. And then I was at the Truckload Carriers Association event in Nashville, the annual event right after Matt's. And yeah, just hearing from fleets, there are some concerns, but everybody's kind of rallied around getting through those. And so it just really encouraged me, just because I plan on being in this industry. You've been in it 33 years, like in fuel hauling and transportation. I was thinking yesterday, somebody was talking about retiring at 65, which I don't ever plan on retiring, but I'm like, I'm only 37. I got at least 30 more years in the industry. Like, I got, 4 or 5 decades in transportation is the plan. So
there you go.
And, so kind of the next question I had was, one of the things we talk about is marketing insights on this podcast. And so I thought kind of your take on, because you're not doing a ton of Google advertising and Facebook advertising and things like that. I wanted to kind of hear, or have the audience hear, kind of what's working for you guys. What are you investing in right now in terms of recruiting? Because you still are growing your fleet, even though you have very few drivers leaving, you're still adding drivers every year.
So we have basically, as I told you when we first met, I'm the worst prospect in the world for you, because I've got my own recruiting team on board. But what we've done is we've invested in in-house recruiting. We've invested in a more robust system to let us stay in touch with candidates, even when I don't have an opening. My goal, my challenge to my recruiting team and to my HR team is, I want to have a candidate pool in every market so that I don't get handcuffed with a situation that I can't term a driver that I need to because of an operational impact. And so what we've done is invested in building that candidate pool. We've invested in communicating through social medias and that kind of thing to say, hey, here's who we are. Again, we recognize we're not for everybody, but if these things are important to you, if safety and maintenance are important to you, if work-life balance, if home time, if getting to a company where you know who the vice president is and maybe someday you'll have dinner with him, if those things are important to you, then hey, give us a look. Then we've invested in our onboarding and recruiting process, or our onboarding process, I should say. Our onboarding now, this is going to scare some people, but it's a full week process. We have internally what we call the RBS Way, which basically boils down to an unwavering commitment to serve the communities, to serve our communities with technology, customer service, and an unwavering support of our people. And so what we do is we spend a lot of time talking about the RBS Way and our onboarding and talking about what that means. It's not just a sticker on the back of my iPad. It's a way of life for us. We talk about that literally every day in our company of, are we doing this the RBS way? Whether it's a pre-trip inspection, whether it's a billing process, whether it's our safety award program, which we're getting ready to pay our first safety awards out on a very, very significant safety award program that we've had. So what we've done is that we've invested in the process to let people see who we really are. And I think based off our results, and in most markets, we do have at least a 1 or 2 candidate waiting list. We continue to struggle in new markets because people just don't think we can be what we say we're going to be. And so we have to go and improve it. But typically what happens to us, we'll be in the market 6 months. We'll get that initial cadre hired and we'll be in the market 6 months. And all of a sudden, the guy that calls and says, well, I told you I wasn't really interested in you 6 months ago. Yeah, I think I'm interested now. And so we really are trying to invest in the process. We're not trying to make it, can you fog the mirror and we're going to give you a seat. We're trying to make it, let's find the right person, the right fit that has the same beliefs and cultural beliefs that we have, and then let's go make magic.
I love it. So what is the RBS way?
It is literally doing things above and beyond what is expected. If I were to boil it down to its simplest sentence. With our drivers, the cell phone policy, right? Zero tolerance. Unfortunately, I've fired far too many people because they couldn't stay off of their cell phone. But this organization, as well capitalized as it is, can't afford a $90 million Warner verdict. If we get that, all of us, including the vice president, better have their LinkedIn resumes polished because ownership's not going to assume that risk. So from a safety perspective, it's doing advanced training. It's doing constant coaching and mentoring. We were involved in a very minor collision about 2 years ago, and we had some culpability. There was $1,600 worth of property damage to the second vehicle. We bent a mud flap hanger. We paid the $1,600 worth of damage, and we got sued for $1 million. And in discovery, we found out that the person driving that vehicle, not only did they not have a current driver's license, they had never had a driver's license. And we still ended up writing a check for $50,000. And the reason we went to mediation was the driver that was involved for us had been with us 7 years, never had a ticket, never had an accident, had over 400 trainings logged on his training manual, and plaintiff's attorney called it check the box training. So we're now trying to go above and beyond in the training and the coaching and the mentoring. I think I told you the story. I tell drivers we're going to coach them more aggressively than they've ever been coached. And I like it to the story of Aaron Judge and Tiger Woods. Aaron Judge 2 years ago hit more home runs than a right-handed hitter in the history of baseball, and he took batting practice every day. Tiger Woods was the number one golfer in the world of golf at one point for over 7.5 years consecutively, and has said in multiple interviews he hit 1,000 golf balls a day. Well, if elite athletes at the peak of their performance with zero chance of dying on the job are willing to invest in their craft every day, why wouldn't we that are hauling around 80,000 pounds of flammable material in urban environments where people aren't paying attention like my guys are? So it's the coaching. The RBS way goes into maintenance. Our drug and alcohol random pool is much greater than the federal minimums. Our maintenance program, we replace steers at 6/30 seconds instead of 4. We replace all other positions at 4 instead of 2. If a cab airbag blows out, we replace all of them at one time instead of waiting for them to blow out individually. In dispatch, we've changed our dispatchers mentality. It's not about creating loads and managing inventory. It's about being customer service agents for our drivers. It's about senior leadership being available to talk to everybody in the organization. My door is always open. Drivers are given a card at the beginning of their service with us that have my address, my email address, and my phone number on it. And I will take a call from a driver 24/7 if I have to. And so that the RBS way is really about just not saying we're going to do the bare minimum, because if we have that catastrophic event, I don't want to have to tell the plaintiff's attorney I just did the bare minimum. I want to be able to say, no, look at all the things we went above and beyond to try to mitigate this. By doing that, creating that culture of safety and responding to our people and that kind of thing, I think it's helped us build this retention rate. And because I get the retention rate, now I've got guys that I know are bought in because they're not leaving me. And I think that's driving down our safety scores. I'll give you an example on our maintenance side, Aaron. Industry average is 20.7% out of service rate for a roadside or way station inspection. Ours is less than 1%. We've gone 2 out of the last 3 quarters. And in Texas, as you know, we suffer a lot of inspections because of all the mix-up units across the state that we don't necessarily see in the other states we operate in. So that's with over 230 inspections on our record. And I've got an out-of-service rate of less than 1%. It's about 0.9%. Wow. That's what the RBS way is.
Yeah, I love that. Just because one of the things like we stand for in my companies is just a growth mindset. And I just see you applying that growth mindset, just going above and beyond, just in the safety and accountability with drivers. And, and one of the things I've found is just people like rise or fall to whatever standard leadership sets. And so by you even setting a standard of you're going to show up, you're going to be available, and, here dispatch is your advocate, and helping you, that's just, so contrary to a lot of fleets that just do the bare minimum and do check the boxes. And so I think, I'm super encouraged by that, because I think you can, even fleets listening to this can be like, wow, we can raise our safety standards and continue to make the industry, just safer. Because to your point, the driver, may have all this training and have done everything, but the four-wheelers necessarily, may not be paying attention, and they may not even have their driver's license, or maybe intoxicated, and you're hauling, what'd you say,
80,000 pounds of flammable liquid.
Flammable liquid. So yeah, you have to, that just, I'm kind of a defensive driver, just assuming everybody's going to cut me off and things like that. And thinking ahead, like if that car pulled off, where would I swerve, things like that. But I can't even imagine in fuel hauling, it's just a whole nother level of slowing down ahead of time and moving over ahead of time, and just, keeping that space, never getting in a hurry. And then, I love the just zero tolerance on the cell phone policy, because it only takes 1 second of being distracted. Yep. And, it's one thing for me to hit somebody in my SUV, like it's another thing to hit them with 80,000 pounds of fuel. So that's super encouraging.
Other thing we're starting to see, particularly in those distracted driving occurrences, is criminal charges being brought against drivers. My general counsel, we're getting very active in an effort here in Texas to chase some further tort reform measures in the upcoming legislative session, building on House Bill 19 that was passed in the 2021 session. And we're seeing criminal charges based off of some research we've done, negligent homicide, vehicular homicide, those kind of things in a distracted driving scenario. And I tell our drivers, I can handle anything this business throws at me, except I'm not sure I can handle knocking on their door and telling their family they're not coming home. And so we talk a lot. That's a lot of the why behind some of the what's we do is, and I literally plead with them every time I see them, don't make me make the knock. And over the course of this 5 or 6 years, from when we changed our perspective of just hiring to retain, we have drivers that are bought in on that, and drivers that will tell us, I used to work at a fleet where I could tell them for 3 weeks that the tires were bald, and they'd say, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And he said, here, I have to get used to the fact that when I say it, you're probably going to make it happen. And that's a really good thing to have in our industry, because the only way for us to counteract a lot of what's going on, I believe, the negative perception in the industry. I had an expert witness tell me one time, he said, everybody's had somebody in their family, whether it be their grandmother, their wife, their daughter, their kids, whatever, who's been cut off by the 5% of the drivers in our industry that are not doing the right thing. And now all of a sudden they're on a jury where a driver was involved in a fatality accident, and this is their chance to get even. And so if we can work as an industry from the inside out to change our perception, to tell our story, to tell people that these really are some of the safest professionals on the planet, I think it will help us when we get into some of these judicial hellholes where we have to try these things and turn juries and not allow plaintiffs' attorneys to make us out to be the bad guy, but to say, this was an unfortunate incident, but look at all the things we did to try to prevent it.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's 100% prevention of just accidents happening, but no. I just love how far y'all are going above and beyond the minimum mandates to make it safer on everybody on the road, not just your drivers, but not having to knock on somebody else's door too. So
Exactly.
Well, is there any question that I did not ask that I should have asked?
I don't think so. I think, if I were to wrap with one thing, I'd just say, doing the right thing, whether it be in your recruiting effort, whether it's in your operations, whether it's in how you treat your people, sometimes it's not the cheapest way to do business. But, we in our business, as an example, have determined it's about $17,000 to recruit, hire, and train a new driver. And so with, for simple math, with 200 drivers, with a 20% turnover rate, that's 40 drivers a year. Even at that number, it's literally over $500,000. But if I was at that 65, 70, 80, 85% rate, and I'm hiring 120, 130 drivers a year, that's money that I'm ultimately going to save that I can invest in doing the right thing by my fleet, my ownership, and the motoring public that we operate around. And so sometimes you have to take the leap of faith. And I was fortunate enough that our ownership believed in what I was talking to them about. And now we look back and go, man, we're really glad we made that move. So I would encourage people to begin to think about doing things a different way than you've already done it, because what you're already doing is just giving you the results you've got. If you don't try something different, you never know whether it'll work or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And kind of, one of my biggest takeaways from what you just said is just having all leadership bought in. Like, because, sometimes you hear of, just an executive, but then the VP of recruiting and ops isn't in alignment, or safety isn't in alignment, or like, it's just cool. Like that you just have this RBS way culture across your organization where everybody's on the same page. And if you're not, then that's not the right place for you. And
yeah.
I just love that transparency. And then just the radical honesty towards drivers of, hey, this isn't the easiest job. Like, here are the downsides. I just think drivers just love hearing that. Just the honesty of, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the challenges, here's how we're advocating for you. Because I think so much time they hear, here's how we're advocating for you. And then it doesn't, like reality doesn't line up with expectations that were set to the good side. Yeah. And then on the bad side, like they didn't expect some of these challenges, and, the radical accountability and things like that weren't established up front. And then, that's when your turnover rates, back up to 50, 60%. So,
we just did an employee survey, and we broke it out into admin positions and driver positions. With I think we had 203 drivers on the roster at the time we did it. We got a 91% response rate from our drivers. And they were brutally honest in some of their comments, right? There are things we don't like, we'd like to see change, that kind of thing. But overwhelmingly, it was one, thank you for the opportunity to at least say what we're thinking. But, I told our HR team, we're going to get 15, 20, 25%, and we're going to think it was a great deal. We got 91%. It tells me that our folks we're not just an employer. They're invested in the future of this company. And man, that's magic. That is just magic.
Yeah. Because you have to be invested to take the time to give that feedback. That's so cool. I don't think I've ever heard of that kind of response rate.
I was blown away.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Terry. We really appreciate having you on the show.
It's been my pleasure, Aaron, and look forward to getting together in Austin sometime soon and having lunch with you.
Let's make it happen.
All right, brother.
Our goal with the Hire Truckers podcast is to provide industry insights, marketing trends, and motivation to help you level up your recruiting game. Thank you for joining us today. And if we added value, please take 10 seconds to share this with your network.